a few people in my group leaving the MTC were waiting on visas. So we ended up leaving like a half week after we were supposed to. So we were leaving Utah, the MTC, on a Friday. And we took a plane and we landed in Buenos Aires, and we had to wait in Buenos Aires for a long time to get a flight to our mission. So we didn't end up getting to Resistencia until probably about midnight. And there were three or four elders with us, and we met the mission president, we met his wife, and they just kind of put us in a car and they drove us to the assistant's house, which was right across the street from the mission home. And I remember driving through the cities and thinking, like, this is where I'm gonna be for the next 2 years, and it was a little scary at first. It just seemed so different. I got there in October. It was actually the first day of General Conference, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But it was the October General Conference, and, we got there, and there were just, people riding motorcycles around without helmets, and, there was a lot of loud music, and it was midnight, which isn't, a normal time to hear so much stuff, like if you were in the States. Anyway, we get to the assistant's house, and we sleep in these bunks, and we didn't get to bed till probably 1 a.m. And I remember just kind of laying in bed and listening to what was going on out in the streets. And I didn't understand that was just the capital city of the mission, and that I wouldn't spend any time in that city, but I remember thinking, this is where I'm going to be for the next 2 years, and I wasn't excited about it. I didn't like it. I was like, this is like too much. It was just kind of a sensory overload, I guess. But we went to sleep. We woke up the next morning at 6:30. And I remember thinking, well, we got here late, we should be able to wake up late, but that wasn't the case. So we woke up, and we did our showers, our exercises, everything, and we went across the street to the mission home. We didn't do any contacting or anything. We just went straight to the mission president's home. He started training us. The mission president's wife talked through wearing sunscreen, drinking lots of water, all that stuff. And then they just kind of gave us a rundown of what we were going to be doing. And then we met our companions. It's a really big mission. So I remember finding out that I was going to be with my trainer, and that we were going to Posadas, which was about 5 or 6 hours away by bus. And I just remember thinking, as we sat and they were talking us through what was going to be happening in the mission, they showed us a slideshow of, all the missionaries, like all their baptisms, all their areas. And they would show, like, it looked very geographically diverse. Like, sometimes they were in a jungle with a waterfall, and sometimes they were in a desert with nothing around them. And my companion started explaining to me, he was like, well, yeah, you got lucky because, this is the part where it's really jungly, there's a lot of rivers and everything. So as we were leaving the mission home, getting on our bus to go to my first area, I started picturing like grass huts and like rivers and canoes and like Indiana Jones stuff. And based off what my companion was describing, that's like exactly what I thought I was going to get myself into. And then after 5 hours on a bus, we got to the city, and it was like a big city, like bigger than my hometown, bigger than, a lot of places I'd been. And we went straight to the stake center because it was General Conference. So we sat and we watched, and I met all the other missionaries. And then, we went home, and I remember thinking to myself, this isn't what I was expecting at all. There's like no jungle, there's no river or anything. So we took a cab to our apartment, and it was just on a little dirt road, and it was kind of more what I was expecting. A little more jungly, lots of trees, very humid. And we got there for the first night. We said our prayers, planned the next day, put my bags away, and then, we just kind of went to bed, and just, it was crazy because within, 24 hours, I went from not knowing anything to understanding quite a bit more, and knowing, where I was and what I was going to be doing for the next few months. There was not a lot of whitewashing going on my mission. So my companion had been there for 2 transfers. And the person that I had just replaced in that area had been there for 3 transfers. So he already knew the area, and luckily when I got there, we had a lot of good investigators. So I remember the first time we went out, as it was general conference, we woke up the Sunday, we were at the steak center all day, and I remember meeting all the new members, and they were all really happy. They were, oh, fresh green missionary, doesn't speak a word of Spanish, all that. But we got back on Sunday afternoon, and we went straight to meet, who seemed to be my companion's favorite investigator family, just because it was a family. They were excited, they were progressing. And I remember walking to their house, and my companion was kind of explaining okay, this is how you be safe in the streets and things like that. But we got to the house, and it's kind of hard in your first few weeks as a missionary, because all the members and all the investigators get really accustomed to the person that you just replaced in the area. So I'd show up and they'd say, oh, where's the other one, But that was kind of hard on me at first, but after a while I just kind of learned to deal with it. But so yeah, we went to go teach them, and we had a really good first lesson. It was my first lesson. They had already had multiple lessons, and we were just kind of reading through the Book of Mormon with them. I didn't understand a lot of what was going on, but they were asking good questions and things like that. And then after that, it was already time to go home. So we went home. The next day was P-Day. I couldn't even tell you what we did. But the day after that, or P-Day at night, the next lesson we went and taught was to a couple that ended up becoming really important to me. As just they were kind of the first people I ever taught. And I was a little more comfortable with what was going on, so I knew what we were talking about. And we just went and we had a family home evening with them, and we shared a scripture, and we asked questions, and we just kind of got to know them. And they were an unmarried couple. Sonia and Diego were their names. And they had a little baby named Nadir, and it was really exciting. I remember walking back to our apartment from their house and just feeling like, wow, I'm a missionary, I'm doing it. And I just felt, the Spirit more strongly than I had up to that point, just because it was so personal to me, and it was becoming so real. And then, throughout the week, we found new investigators, and we taught a lot of other lessons, and it was just, that whole week was just a blur. It was just me kind of tagging along, and I don't really feel like I did a lot to help the companionship in that first week. But I definitely learned and grew a lot, and I started to make friends with members of the ward and with investigators and things like that. And it was just really exciting to cultivate those relationships and kind of plant the seed for future teaching of the gospel. Geographically, when I arrived, the mission was Argentina, Resistencia, and that was the size of the state of California. So it was a huge mission. And it bordered Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, were the three different countries that it bordered. And it stretched all the way from Formosa to Posadas, or to Misiones is the name of the province. And then, a year after I left, they split it right along the Paraná River. So it ended up being Chaco, Corrientes, and Formosa on one side, and then Misiones on the other side. And those are the names of the provinces, which are like the states. But geographically, it's a huge mission, and you get a whole range, like a whole spectrum of different, terrains. On the Misiones side and parts of Corrientes, it's really jungly, really tropical. And actually Corrientes, since I've been home, I've read up a lot on what it's called, and it's technically called South American Mesopotamian Plateau, which it's exactly what you would imagine Mesopotamia would be like. It's very dry, but there's grasslands. It's a really pretty place. And then Formosa kind of had the reputation of being very barren, very desert-like. And so that's kind of what the geography was like. The church is not super strong there. The closest temple to the mission is in Paraguay, in Asunción. So for some members, it's 15 minutes away. And for some members, it's 8 hours away, depending on where you're coming from within the mission. The mission itself started in 1991, I believe. And before that, Elder Christofferson came to our mission when he was there. And when he was serving, and I think it was just called the Northern Argentina Mission, he served in the town of Corrientes. So the church has been there for a long time. It wasn't until the 90s that it was really able to start developing more quickly, just because there were more missionaries there. But yeah, so when I was there, there were 2 stakes in the whole mission. and everything else was just branches. Branches and districts. So you were considered to be really lucky if you were put into a ward, but most of the time you were in a branch. And the church is really small. I mean, and since it is so small, there are missionaries that are branch presidents. And the biggest struggle facing the church there is getting good priesthood holders to join the church. Because, I mean, the women in Argentina, I mean, you teach them and they're very faithful and they're very believing. But the men seem to be a little harder of heart, and that's why the church has a hard time growing, because you can't become a ward or a stake without a certain amount of priesthood holders. So those were the struggles we were kind of facing. But the church has been growing a lot. I mean, between 1991 and 2012, it split into 2 missions, so there are twice as many missionaries in the area now. And the work really is progressing. In my time there, I saw it grow and become stronger, and wards split and branches split. And the splitting is good because it means that you're getting enough to really cover the area effectively. First of all, the people are great, especially in Resistencia. They're all very humble. When people think of Argentina, a lot of people right off the bat will think of Buenos Aires, and that's a very proud city. A lot of people in Buenos Aires, aren't very receptive. They're used to being in a city, but up north it's kind of like the farmland. It's just, it's like if you're in the American South, it's like everyone's, hey, how are you? Come on in, we want to hear your message. Whether or not they're interested, they'll always invite you in, which becomes a challenge later on. But they're really warm, they're really friendly, they're great people. They're very happy. But yeah, like I mentioned earlier, they are relatively poor. The government and economy is relatively socialized in Argentina, so a lot of the people are living off the government. At the beginning of the month, the government gives them a paycheck, and they kind of just live off that. There is a large indigenous population, especially over in Chaco and Formosa. In one of the areas I was in, we were in charge of 2 towns. One was a town called Ibarreta, which was just like the normal city. A bunch of Argentines lived there. But across the highway, it was probably like 2 miles. My companion and I we'd go there at least once a week, and it was an Indian colony for an Indian tribe called the Pilaga. And there were maybe 100 people that lived out there. There are maybe 1,000 people in the world that speak Pilaga, but that was the only language they spoke. So we'd go out with a translator, and there was a branch there. So, I mean, you could easily say that the majority of Pilaga speaking people or Pilaga descendants are members of the church, because 40 or 50 members of that little branch that was across the street from the town we were in. But the other big tribes out there, you got Pilaga, and there's a reservation called the Primavera tribe that's in Formosa. So there's a pretty big indigenous population. One of the cities in Misiones is called Oberá, and it's a bunch of Hungarians. So I'm not sure exactly when they came over. I'm sure it must have been around the World Wars, but in a lot of places in Argentina, it's kind of a novelty to have light skin, blonde hair, blue eyes. But you go there and you're just another face in the crowd, because almost everyone in that town is a white person. But yeah, almost everyone is Catholic, and whether or not they're very active in the church varies a lot. A lot of times they're not active until we show up and invite them to come to church, and they say, oh no, I'm Catholic, I could never go to another church. And sometimes, which is really hard, they'll know that the church is true, but they have such a hard time letting go of those customs that they choose to not get baptized because of their friends or their family. But yeah, so it's really poor. Everyone's Catholic. Like, how you make a living depends a lot on what province you live in. Like I said, a bulk of people's incomes is from government plans where they pay you, whether it be for having kids or whatever, in Formosa and Chaco, it's largely agriculture. Cotton is a major crop that they grow over there. In Corrientes, it's a lot of, so it's not, I don't know, livestock is the word. And that's, Argentina is known for its beef, and a lot of its beef is coming from Corrientes. So people would leave the town for 2 weeks and go out to the field, and they would work in the field, whether it be putting up fences, but it was all just caring for livestock. And then Misiones, I was really only in Posadas, so I can really only speak to that. But that was just a normal city. We had members, investigators that were, we had a carpenter, we had an accountant, but it's definitely a more modern city. There are business people there. And that's almost the same as asking me what the majority of people do in my ward here in town. I don't know. They all go to work from 9 to 5, but I couldn't tell you exactly what they do. But for the other provinces, it's definitely, agriculture and livestock. I never had a single problem. When I was zone leader, there was a companionship in my zone that got held up at gunpoint. My companion, my trainer, got robbed. They have something called motochorros, which is just motorcycle robbers, and they would just drive past and grab your bag and take off. But generally, if they steal your bag, they find out that you only have a couple Book of Mormons and some pamphlets, and they don't really rob you again. At no point did I ever feel unsafe. And that could just be, because of confidence, but I really did feel safe. And the members were always willing to give you a heads up. They'd say, elders, maybe stay out of that neighborhood at night, or things like that. But people in most of the towns that I was in, people came to know us, and they'd just say, oh, hey, yeah, it's you guys. I know you don't have anything, I'm not worried about it. So, safety and crime was never a big deal, but, almost always, I'd say every month or every time there was a zone leader conference or, a mission conference, you'd hear about somebody getting robbed. But it was kind of, I don't think I ever met anyone who was robbed twice in their mission. It was just kind of, maybe it happened to you once and that was it. A lot of the people you meet, assuming that you're, a North American with a North American companion, a lot of stuff will just slide. They'll just pass it off as ignorance. But I remember in one of my zones, there was a missionary who was from Argentina, and he wanted to make sure that Americans didn't do anything, kind of silly. So one thing I didn't even think about, it wasn't even until like a year in my mission that I realized that it could even potentially be offensive, is pointing at things with your finger or pointing at a person. Because here it's like, hey, could you pass that to me? And that seems like a totally normal thing, but apparently if you point at a person in Argentina with your index finger, it's really impolite. So that was a big thing that afterward I was always really conscious to, either point with like my whole hand or just be really sensitive about that. But yeah, the people were really understanding, really forgiving. So if I made anything that was kind of embarrassing, it was just passable because they're like, oh, you don't know any better. One thing that was kind of hard for me is I've always liked to joke with people. And my preferred method of joking is sarcasm, which doesn't translate very well. And I'm not sure if it's just a Spanish or if it's specific to Argentine culture. But I would, say something the opposite of what something was, and they would say that I was lying. And I'd be like, oh no, it's just a joke. And they're like, no, that's a lie. And it was funny because I was just doing it lightheartedly, and they'd say, no, elder, you're lying. And it was hard for me to make that transition, just because obviously as a representative of Jesus Christ, you don't want to come across as somebody who lies. So maybe I had to change my style of humor. Argentine humor is very different than American humor. Like the funniest possible thing in Argentina would be like if somebody's pants fall down and they're wearing like underwear with like hearts on it. Like that's the kind of humor that they just love. So that was one thing that was a kind of an adjustment for me. And then, another thing, whenever you're leaving, so you're like, let's say you're here in the States and you're at a group of people talking, and there's 3 or 4 people and you just want to leave, you just kind of do. Maybe you say, excuse me, maybe you don't, maybe you just kind of sneak away because everyone else's focus is somewhere else. But if you walk away from a person in Argentina without saying permiso, or like, excuse me, like I'm going to leave, that's really, really bad etiquette. And I definitely made a few people mad on accident that way because it's just polite there. It's just something you do. But other than that, I think those are pretty much the big things that I really had to deal with. So Argentina, especially the north where Resistencia is like it's right next to Brazil, and that's where the big Carnival thing happens at the beginning of every year. And that's something that it's basically just a wild party, lots of alcohol, lots of making a mess, parades of scantily clad women, things like that. So when people were to get baptized and make a change in their life, that was usually the first thing to go, was Carnival. And then pretty much every holiday is based around drinking there, which I'm not sure how different that is from the States. But Christmas, Easter, everything was about, just kind of getting together and being with family, which for a lot of people entailed drinking. I remember we were walking on, Easter weekend. We were just walking around and we saw a bunch of kids playing like dice, like gambling. And I asked my companion, he was like, yeah, it's apparently to commemorate the Roman soldiers. So I was like, well, don't they know that too? Crucified Jesus. So I didn't think it was a really good celebration of Easter, but there are definitely different traditions. Since Christmas and New Year's are in the summer months, it's basically what you imagine for like the 4th of July. It's like big barbecue, big party. There's no tree, there's not as much gift giving going on. But it's just basically a time for family to get together and to have a big barbecue. There's always really good meat to be had. But yeah, those are the big ones. Another thing is the Argentine government will have what they call feriados, pretty much like once or twice a month, and that's just a day where no one has work. And it's, Flag Day, Day of the Friend, Mother's Day, Father's Day. It's just any excuse really to just take a day off, which was great for proselyting. We'd always be more excited to find people on Sundays, Mondays, and holidays because that's when we knew the family would be together at home. In terms of food, it is very different. The main dish that they have down there that's something that you'll eat, 4 out of 5 meals is called guiso. And I think basically translated it means stew. And what it is it's chicken, rice, and vegetables. Sometimes it's noodles instead of rice. And they make it all in the same pot. And it's something that, the first time I ate it, I was like, well, this isn't spectacular, but something that I've sort of come to miss since. And I stay in contact with a lot of the members down there and I ask them how to make it. So basically what you do is you put you chop all your vegetables up and you put them in, oil so they get all transparent. And then you put the chicken in there, and then you put the rice on top, and then you put water in and you kind of let it simmer down until the rice is soft. And, the first few times I had it, I was like, well, this isn't anything special, but it ended up being like one of my favorite things to eat. It's just a hearty meal and it gets you full and it really gets the job done. Another thing that they'll eat is called gnocchis, which are potato noodles. And they have those probably, I remember there was a thing they called it Gnocchi Day, and it was, I think, the second Thursday of every month. They just made gnocchis. And that was really good. It was a very similar style. Just instead of rice or noodles, it was gnocchis. And then when it comes to eating out, which missionaries do a lot just because we're accustomed to that sort of culture of, I'm hungry, I'm going to go get food. There aren't like restaurants, here in the States, you can go get a burger. You can get pretty much anything in about 5 minutes. But if you go in Argentina, they have places called comedors, which is just like an eatery. And you go and it's not as common practice. People don't eat out every day there. But what you get there, you get empanadas, which are delicious. You have either baked or fried. And the 3 main kinds are beef, like ground beef, with like eggs and olives in it. It's really good. Ham and cheese or chicken. And then another big thing is milanesas, which is kind of like country fried steak. It's just breaded either chicken or beef that's fried. And that's really good. You'll eat a lot of that. When you're eating with members, one of the things that you need to remember is, especially in Resistencia, is everyone is low income. So a lot of times what's on the table in front of you is what they have. So if they give you a full portion, eat everything. It's really normal to just go in and, if you clean the plate off completely, they're going to be happy. So, any sauce or anything that's left, they'll eat bread with every single meal. So if it's a guiso, if it's soup, if it's milanesa, they're just going to have a side of bread. And you use that bread to swipe anything off the table, any juices, or off the plate, any juices, any rice, anything left over, try and get that off and just return a clean plate. I mean, obviously they're still going to wash it, but it's just kind of showing, that was great, thank you so much, and it's showing your gratitude. In some ways it's similar to American food. In the White Handbook it says don't eat at street, at carts. So that's a lot of times the most convenient thing, but you're supposed to avoid that. But when it comes to comparing it to American things, I'd say the biggest difference is that for us, the biggest, most important meal of the day is dinner. That's when family gathers around. That's kind of where you recap the day and everything. And in Argentina, it's lunch. Dads will come home from work, kids come home from school, and everyone gets together for lunch. So breakfast is on your own as a missionary, dinner is on your own as a missionary, but lunch is the main meal of the day. We had crocodile empanadas, which was actually really good. There's this soup, though, that they make in the wintertime called locro. And I actually really enjoyed it until there was like this big ward branch activity to make locro. And they were showing us everything that went in, and it was intestines and cow foot. And they used the cow foot like as part of the soup to like make it thicker. So it was one of those things that it was like, I would eat it and I'd say, oh, this is really good. But then you watch it be made and you're a little more hesitant to go back for it for seconds and thirds. So it was my first area, and there was this family, and there was a guy who was a recent convert, and his name was Petty. What was his real name? I don't know. They called him Petty, which just means like he was a little guy. And everyone in the whole neighborhood loved him. It was probably the poorest neighborhood that was in that area. And it was, dirt roads and huts just kind of made out of wood. When it rained, it was just muddy and a disaster. And so this guy, Petty Custodio, would go out, and he was just kind of a handyman. He would fix stuff. He would, cut people's lawns. He was a gardener. And before he met the missionaries, he was, just kind of the town drunk. But after he met the missionaries, he used that enthusiasm that he had for life, and he really channeled it into the gospel. So he would, we'd go over to his house for lunch or dinner, and people would be walking down the street and they'd say, "Hey, Petty, how you doing?" And he'd say, "Oh, come over here. I want you to meet my friends." And they'd get in and realize like, oh, they're Mormons, right? And, but eventually we started talking to Petty's neighbor. He was like, "Oh, you know what? You should go talk to my neighbor." And we said, "Yeah, of course." And it was a lady named Mabel. And, she came over, and she was illiterate, so it was a really slow progression. But we started to teach her and stuff, and she ended up getting baptized. And that was great. We were really excited. And she had been married and separated from her husband, who was a guy named Jorge. And he started coming around when we were there. And originally he had come around to say, "Hey, I don't want you talking to those Mormons because they come from America and they're spreading, whatever." And Jorge was, he at first, when I first met him, he was a mean, scary guy. He was taller than me, which wasn't common down there. He was chain smoking cigarettes, and he just kind of had a nasty disposition. But, one day we were there, and we just left him the new Gospel Principles book. It had just come out. And we said, "Hey, Jorge, look, I know that you aren't super into us, but we just wanted to give you a book." And he said, "Whoa, a book? That's great." I mean, a book is kind of a sign of diplomacy. It's like, it's a nice gift. And we didn't think too much of it. We just thought, here's a book. And the next time we came back, he looked different. You could just tell that something was different with him. And we said, "Hey, Jorge, how's it going?" He said, "Guys, I finished that whole book you gave me." He thought, "Seriously? That's like, it was like a week ago or whatever." And he was like, "Yeah, I loved it. And I'm coming to church on Sunday and I want to quit smoking." We were like, "Okay, that's great." And he did, and it was a struggle for him. But we'd buy him mints, and we'd stop by every day. And we'd say, "Hey, Jorge, how you doing?" And he was coming to church, and it was really nice. I mean, it was weird because we weren't able to be there for the whole thing because the Gospel Principles book had taught him so much. That we were just kind of reviewing it. We'd say, "Okay, Jorge, today we're going to talk about the word of wisdom." He's like, "I can't drink, smoke, drink tea or coffee, and I'm supposed to eat good foods." We were like, "Yeah, that's pretty much it." But it was really great to see just the difference in his countenance. Like I said earlier, he was kind of mean, kind of scary. And by the time it was coming around for him to get baptized, he was just the nicest guy. The whole ward loved him. And he had really changed. The reason he had originally split from his wife Mabel and they were living separately was because they were fighting, because he was a drunk, he was mean. And they were starting to spend a lot more time together. We'd walk by and they'd be sitting there drinking mate in the shade. And it was really cool to see him change as a person. And then it came time for him to get baptized. And I remember he kind of teared up a little. And he said, "Elder Kimball, will you baptize me?" And that was a really special moment for both of us. And he got baptized, and then that was my very first area in the mission. And I came back. My last area in the mission was just the next area over. So I got permission from the mission president. And I went back and we visited Jorge. And in the time that I had been gone, which was about 2 years, he had been endowed, his wife had been endowed, they had been sealed, and he was the elders quorum president. And it was just amazing that, in the course of so little, a man who was in his 50s, late 50s, had changed from being this mean, drunk, scary chain smoker to the elders quorum president who was reaching out and benefiting other people's lives. There's no way that I could ever take credit for his conversion because, it was all between him and the Lord. But it was really, really awesome to be there and watch that change and see how much good it ended up doing. One of the first meals I had was polenta, which is basically just I think it's just called cornmeal. And I ended up really liking it, but the first time I had it, it was cold and it had this Parmesan cheese on it, and it was just the texture was really bad and it tasted like good ones. When I was branch president, it was the end of the year, and for the end of the year they have a big party, and there was only 200 pesos left in the ward budget, which was $50. So we couldn't go get a big fancy dinner. So what we ended up doing was we went and we bought a sheep. And we just gave it to the branch and they skinned it, and that's what we ate for the branch party. So the way that you say cool in Argentina is capo or copado. To say something is copado means that it's really cool. But if you say capado, that means castrated. So you can kind of do the math there. When you clap at a house and somebody doesn't come out, a lot of times they'll say, "Oh, my mom said she's not here," or something like that if it's a little kid. So once me and my companion got rejected door after door after door, and we clapped and this kid came out and said, "My mom said she's not here." And we were just tired, so we just decided to kind of have fun with it. Because obviously it was a cultural thing. They didn't want to come out and offend us to our faces. So we'd say to the kid, "Okay, well, can you go ask your mom if she's ever heard of the Mormons?" And he'd run, and then he'd come back and he'd say, "No, she said she's never heard of them." And we'd say, "Well, ask her what she's doing on Sunday." And he'd run back in and say, "Well, oh, she's not busy on Sunday." And we'd say, "Okay, well, ask her if she wants to come to church with us." And he'd run, and it was just funny having a little messenger boy. I don't know. I learned my whole mission every day. I learned something great, but what I really think that my big takeaway was that relationships are the most important thing that you can have. Every time you meet a person, that's a new door that's opening, whether it be a door for their benefit, for your personal benefit, and in a missionary especially, an opportunity to share the gospel. But it's definitely 100% about the people that you meet, and you're meeting them for a reason. You're called to that mission for a reason, and every person you meet is a child of God, and you are meeting them for a reason. There's something that you can share that no one else can. Same vein, I'd say that the best skill that I gained was just people skills, because everyone ticks a little differently, and as a missionary, it's really important to know what makes somebody tick, because that's how you're going to reach them. So I'd say the best skill I learned was being able to gauge right off the bat the best way to come through to someone, whether it be, through a joke or through offering to help. But I definitely learned how to gauge really quickly the best way to break through to someone. Study the scriptures. As simple as it may sound, my whole life, I went through the scriptures studying through the lens of how can I apply this to me? And if I could go back and prepare for my mission again, it would be study through the lens of how does this apply to helping somebody live the gospel in a general sense? Because all my problems were really specific. I want to ask this girl out and I'm scared or whatever, isn't a problem that people worry about. That's just me. So focus on others when you're doing your scripture study. And that'll be a skill that you'll use every day of your mission. I got married just over a year and a half after I got home. And that was bar none the best decision I ever made. Because, it's just getting a companion that you're really into. She helps me. As time goes on after the mission, the spirituality can fade away if you're not feeding the flame. And I had roommates that were mission companions that we weren't reading the scriptures together and we weren't going to the temple together. But my wife and I, we know that we're in this for the long term, and she's helped keep me on track more than anything that I could do on my own. Oh, Boca. And here's the thing. People are going to tell you to go with River Plate, but that's always the wrong decision.
Leaving the MTC, it was kind of like a dream, I feel like. None of it really hit. Got on the bus, drove up to Salt Lake Airport. And even the flight, so we flew from Salt Lake to LA. And even that whole trip was just is this really happening? And then once we were on the plane in LA, we took off and went to Lima from there. One of the missionaries who was in my group said, as we were taking off, get your last look at the United States, because this is the last time we're going to see it for 2 years. And, just looking out the window, there goes the coast of California, and I'm in a whole other world, and I just no idea what to expect. Landed in Lima, and that was my first experience with Spanish. And I remember we were walking around, just getting a sandwich. And somebody asked us what time it was. They asked us in Spanish, and I was with another elder, and we had no clue what had just been said. And we both looked at each other, and then they said it in English. They spoke English. It all just layered on top of each other. Got to Buenos Aires, and it was super, just chaotic. There's people everywhere. It was loud. I remember super humid once we got out of the airport. They stuck us in this transport van, and they took us to a motel. And I remember just looking at the atmosphere. Everything was so much more enclosed just in Buenos Aires. There were the roads had lines painted on them to keep lanes, but I feel like they were just more for decoration. Nobody followed anything. Stoplights were mood lighting. When you were stopped, you just have motorcycles just weaving in and out of stopped traffic, and for me that was just nuts. I got to this motel, and they were cooking us some food. We crossed paths with the group that was leaving from another mission. I don't remember which one. They were going home. They were talking to us, and they were like, hey, you guys should go outside and do some contacting or whatever. And that was the last thing I wanted to do at that moment. So they were cooking our food, and we were just in the motel. And me and a couple other missionaries decided we were going to go just take a walk around the block, celebrate our newfound freedom from the MTC. And we walked down, just people and cars everywhere, and it's loud, and dogs. I just remember lots of dogs. But I think the one thing that just really opened my eyes to this is a brand new world was we came up to the corner of this intersection, and in the middle of the road right in front of us was a box on fire, just burning, and nobody was freaking out or anything. It was just there burning, no big deal. Everyone was just driving by it, walking by it, and there's three of us Americans are just looking at this box on fire, like, why is nobody doing anything about this? Yeah, that was pretty shocking to see. That it's just part of life. And then throughout the next 2 years, you just see, it's just how people get rid of garbage. They just burn it, and nobody says anything, thinks anything of it. At that motel, I had the best steak I've ever had in my entire life. Not even close. I just remember it was so good. Did that. Got us loaded onto another plane that flew us up to Resistencia. I was exhausted. Apparently, like during the flight, I fell asleep, and the stewardess came to tried to wake me up and give me some food, and I was just out. They couldn't wake me up. And when I did wake up, I was like, "Oh, did they bring food yet?" And the missionary was like, "Yeah, they came like an hour ago, and you just wouldn't wake up." So I was pretty tired. I arrived in Resistencia. We stayed with the assistants. One of them was from Honduras, if I remember correctly, and the other one was an American. They took us in. Just remember layers and layers of bunk beds in their apartment. And I went with a pretty big group. There were 20, 25 or so of us, I think. So we all got shoved into all these bunk beds, and woke up at 6 the next morning, had a meeting with the mission president. I was still tired. We were all still just exhausted, so we're all kind of trying to not fall asleep during this meeting. My mission president was an Argentine, and he didn't speak any English. So that was also a trial by fire. The American assistant had to translate a lot of what happened, of what was being said. And then, they split us off into little groups. We went out into the main city there. I was with a small group that was with the assistant from Honduras. And we just went street contacting. And I just remember I was so nervous. I didn't want to say anything because I couldn't understand a word they were saying, and so I had a hard time responding to them. So if I could start a conversation, I was okay. I could speak it, but I couldn't understand it. So if I got the first word in, I felt pretty comfortable. But once they asked a question or they spoke back to me, I was finished. I couldn't keep up very well. My trainer was Argentine, and he spoke zero English. Like the only word he said, he knew how to say yes, and he pronounced it yes. So communicating with him was hard. It was really hard. And then my first area was in Monte Carlo, which is now in the Posadas mission. They spoke Spanish, but in Argentina, like, they speak a different accent than we were taught here at the MTC. So I had to deal with the accent, plus the fact that my area was sandwiched in between Brazil and Paraguay. So I got a mixture of this Argentine Spanish with Portuguese and a language they speak in Paraguay called Guarani. And in that first area, they just kind of mush all three of those together, and that's how they talk. So I have, honestly, my first area, I've never felt so alone in my entire life. I couldn't talk to my trainer. Luckily, there was one member in that first area who was an English teacher, and he spoke pretty good English. So that was a help. However, after like the first week, he's like, "I'm not gonna speak to you in English anymore." He was a return missionary, and he's like, "Okay, you're here. I'm not speaking to you in English, period." And he didn't. He was true to his word. Street contacting. My trainer he eased me into it quite a bit. He took care of most of the. By most, he did basically all of the street contacts for the first little while. Street contacting wasn't very good. The best way was to find or go to people's homes, because Argentines were a lot more open. They believe in God, and they don't really care what religion you're a part of. Like, if you just say, "Hey, we're representatives of Jesus Christ, we have to share a message," they'll be like, "Oh, come on in. We love hearing about Jesus. We love hearing about the Lord." So that was the best way to do it. It's a little different than going to people's homes here in America. When you go up, you don't go up to their door and knock. You stand off the property and you clap, and then they'll come out and they'll say, "Yeah, come on, you can come on come on." And they'll either just like set up chairs on the porch, or they'll invite you inside. Yeah, my companion took care of most of that, of the street contacting and doing contacts in people's homes. I honestly had no idea how to like start a conversation like that. Just be like, hey, I just want to talk to you about Jesus. I mean, it was nerve-wracking for me. Yeah, my companion helped a bit, just easing me into it. He let me, he gave me a couple lines to just kind of throw out there, and once they spoke, he would just take over from there. People in Argentina and in the north, they really value football, soccer, and honestly, that was one of the things that I was able to use to get into doors, was just talking to people about soccer. That you just go up, and I was there during the World Cup, which was a crazy experience. But I mean, just as soon as I start talking about soccer, a lot of people just open up completely, and you're just best pals, and they'll invite you in. And I mean, Argentinians are open in that way. I mean, they have no problem inviting you in for the most part to teach a lesson. They love the sport. They're really big. Like the equivalent in Argentina of like the Lakers and Celtics, for them would be, the two teams are Boca and River. Like those two teams just dominate the country. A lot of times people would ask me point blank, are you a fan of Boca or River? And I kind of picked a neutral team so I wouldn't make enemies while I was down there. But that's the big rivalry. Whenever those two teams play, it's a big event. And during the World Cup or whenever Boca and River were playing each other, the country shuts down completely, and everybody watches. As far as why that is, I don't know if I have a why. I mean, they've had so many great players go through Argentina. Diego Maradona. You have Lionel Messi, who's from Argentina. And they've always been a pretty good soccer country. So I would say learn to love what the people love, because that gets you a foot in the door immediately. And even now, I mean, I still keep up with what's going on in Argentine soccer. Yeah, I mean, that it was honestly, it was a good missionary tool. Christmas is awesome. It's different from here. One thing that I remember, Christmas, I feel like Christmas Eve is a bigger deal than Christmas itself. Christmas Eve, everyone buys fireworks, and at midnight, everyone just starts shooting them off. Everybody, it sounds like a war zone. But I mean, just huge parties, everybody gets together, and they celebrate. They celebrate together, and then they have a lot of like little holidays, Day of the Worker, Children's Day, just all these little holidays, and they get all these holidays off, and it's an excuse for them to party together, to hang out together. The day after each of these holidays, you have to be careful, because a lot of people are hungover, and can be a little bit grumpy. So, but yeah, I mean, they love finding reasons to hang out together, to be together and enjoy each other's company. So tons of Catholics, and one thing with Argentina is they believe in God and in Jesus Christ, kind of at a distance. Like they believe in Jesus, and that's really it. Like they believe that he's important, but they don't really know why. And a lot of them, like, frankly, don't care. A lot of them were baptized Catholic as children, and that was it. They'll go to church, around Christmas time, around Easter. I mean, they're just really laid back about that kind of thing. The one thing that a lot of people assume is that Argentina, just like the Latin American influence, it's all spicy food. Argentina, they don't handle spicy food like at all. So that's just South America. Argentina, you'll eat a lot of pasta. I ate a ton of pasta while I was there. I remember they put mayonnaise on everything. Mayonnaise goes on everything. Really simple salads, just kind of throw a bunch of vegetables in and throw some vinegar on there and just eat it like that. Rice and mayonnaise was big. They would spaghetti with just kind of whatever meat they had. Those were pretty big too. And I mean, they had names for all these dishes, but I can't remember them right now. One of my weirdest experiences was with a dish called mondongo, which is cow stomach. And it's funny because I went down there and this one member was just like, "Here, we want you to eat this." They wouldn't tell me what it was. I'm like, "Well, what is it?" Like, just eat it. We'll tell you after. Like, come on. Like, I was pretty open. I knew I was gonna eat some pretty weird stuff. It's all right. It's cow stomach, and I ate it. It was cut into strips, and it. I mean, I don't want to use the cliche, but it tasted like chicken. It's exactly what it tasted like. The only difference was a lot more. It was chewier. So it took a while to get through it, to bite through it. But it was pretty good. They typically put it in stew. One of the other things that they had that they ate a lot was something called locro, which I absolutely despised. And a lot of people love it. A lot of people just think it's the greatest thing in the world. I think I just had bad experiences with it. We went down and a family was like, "Yeah, we made you some locro," which is basically, again, it's a stew. They just kind of throw an entire pig in, like everything. Just to chop up a pig and just throw all of its innards and meat into it. And the one that I ate particularly was terrible. There was no meat. It was all just fatty, and I got sick from it. So every time, it's funny, every time I went to talking up to another member, they'd be like, "Oh, have you had locro before, Elder?" "Yeah, I have," and it was the worst thing ever. And everybody was just like, "Oh, we make the best locro." Like, everybody is just convinced that they make the best locro in Argentina. As far as food goes, those were the two main experiences, weird experiences that I had. There's like they'll put like communal bread on the table, just like a really large breadstick, and everyone just kind of tears pieces off of it. They eat bread in every meal. Just stick a big loaf of bread out. Pre-sliced bread is not very common. That's one thing that is pretty different from here. So literally it's just like a loaf, and you just can rip pieces off of it and just eat bread with everything. One food that I can't believe I forgot to mention, that you'll eat a lot of, and I learned how to make. It's called an empanada. So it's basically just it's like a miniature calzone, basically. They'll put chicken in it, beef in it, ham and cheese. It's so good. I loved empanadas. Sometimes they fry them, sometimes they bake them. But walking by bakeries, I mean, for me, it was just, I want to go in and see if they have any empanadas. I loved empanadas. They were so stinking good. And one of the main desserts they had down there was called an alfajor, which it's a brownie cupcake type of thing. It's just two pieces of cake with a layer of what's called dulce de leche, kind of like a caramel, or they'll put like chocolate in there. Yeah, those are two things that I absolutely loved about Argentina, were empanadas and alfajores. So stinking good.
Yeah.
Be careful.
Okay.
Buying from street vendors. I mean, hygiene is not what it is here. I remember I saw with my own eyes a street vendor who, I don't remember what he was making, but he took a break and took a bunch of his utensils and just walks over to a fountain that was going off in the park and washed his utensils off in this fountain. And so, I mean, like, be careful, like, ask people in the area, like, if you like, some street food is really good, and I would highly recommend a lot of the street food. But ask before you buy, like, ask from people who know, like, so where's the good food at? Because otherwise you can get really, really sick. Of all the baptisms that I had, played a big role in, 80 to 90% of those came from connections with members of some kind. We would do little games with members, like we would do they don't invite us to dinner, they invite you to lunch, because lunch is the big meal in Argentina. So we would play little games, like, okay, so like, we'd speak to one of them, like a member of the family, and be like, how long have you lived here in Argentina? How long have you been in this neighborhood? Oh, well, I've been here for 21 years. And I'd be like, okay, well, I've only been here for 4 or 5 weeks. So it would stand to reason that you know more people than me, right? You'd be like, oh, yeah, yeah. Like, all right, so we're going to play a game. We each have a sheet of paper. We're going to write down as many names of people that we know in this area, okay? All right. And then, whoever wins gets, a cupcake or whatever, something stupid like that. And then, they just start thinking of every single person they know and just writing down all their names. And really, I mean, as a missionary, we don't really care to win. Like, we're doing this so that they write all these names and like, okay, so now, like, who are these people? Can we go visit them? And then, and so that was a good way to get people to not, like, we're not looking just always for the perfect person, the one who approaches you and be like, hey, I want to become a Mormon now. Will you help me? Because nobody's going to do that. You just like, just that the connection, the fact that they even know you is enough. Something that they can connect to. So we get all these names from these members and just be like, okay, so where do they live? What's their story? Do you know anything else about them that we can that would help us be able to teach them better? And that was kind of one of the little tricks that we used to get referrals from members. And I mean, seriously, getting referrals from members is always the most effective way, like, to find people who will accept the gospel. Just going door to door. I mean, we found a ton of people to teach, but very rarely did that ever materialize into something, into a progressing investigator. Because, I mean, the people that refer to you already have that connection. Typically, if they are referred, I mean, they know the member really well. And then you can bring those members along to lessons, and then the people you're teaching can see somebody that they know personally in a different setting and see how it has affected their life, and how the teaching can apply it to their own. Because I mean, it's hard. You have 2 missionaries just show up at the door, who you really don't have a whole lot in common with. Different culture. They come from a different country. So yeah, I mean, they're more than willing to listen to a lesson, but when they have that personal connection to somebody that they know, who goes through all the same trials and problems and is involved in all the same, country politics, they can, they'll better relate to that, and will be more willing to make the changes to better their own lives and mirror what has happened to the member. It really depended on what time of the year it was, because it does get so hot in the summer. My mission president, he switched every 6 months, or every, as the seasons changed, he would switch the schedule. So during the winter, you do all your studies in the morning, personal study, companionship study, and language study. And then you go out and work. The morning and the time right after lunch, the siesta, were probably the two times that we would try to set up appointments the most. I mean, in the morning, people are out working, kids are at school, and then they come home for lunch, take a siesta. So I mean, everything kind of closes, so everyone gets their mid-afternoon nap in. And then they go back to work, finish up the workday, and then come home. Tracting, especially during the siesta, was not productive because everyone's asleep. They don't really want to be bothered. They're, getting over eating that huge meal at lunch. Best time to find people was probably started from about 5 to 6:30 or 7. I feel like was the best time to find people, because they all get home, they're settling down. So yeah, typically, so in the winter we would do our studies in the morning, go out. Usually we would visit a member in the morning, go to a member's home for lunch. If we didn't have a member to feed us lunch that day, we'd go back to the apartment and eat something. And then we would try to schedule our appointments with investigators after lunch during the siesta, which also worked really well because that's usually at the quietest time of the day. Again, because everybody is asleep, there's not as much going on. And I feel like that facilitated the Spirit a lot more. Yes, we would do that. And then typically late afternoon into the early evening, we would do our tracting, finding new people, all the way up till it was time to go home. Then get back to the apartment, or do your daily planning for the next day, and hit the hay. So I was in this area. It was called Paso de los Libres. And there was a kid. He was 18. His name was Nicolas. He was really shy. He didn't have a ton of friends, but he had a member of his family who was a Mormon. And we went to their house for lunch one day, and Nicolas was there. And we shared a message with the family. And on us as missionaries, I mean, we could have been a little more forward with Nicolas. We just kind of assumed, he was just part of the family. I was new to the area, and we shared this message, and just something you kind of regurgitate after being out for so long. We shared this little message, and at the end, you always ask, hermano, hermana, do you know somebody that we can go teach? And I remember the member said, well, my nephew here isn't. He's not a member. They're like, oh, Nicolas, no. So where do you live? And he's like, oh, my family lives up here, but I'm with my aunt a lot. Like, well, can we come by in the next little while and come teach a message? And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. That sounds good. And so we did. Like the next week, we came by, and we already had the member present because we were at her house, and that helped a lot because she sat in. So we were able to kind of bounce off of her a little bit, that familial connection, just being like, this is what I can do for your family. And to an 18-year-old kid, I mean, he was a little skeptical at first, like any 18-year-old would be, or he's just kind of like aloof. But kind of with the prodding of his aunt, we were he kind of opened up a little bit, and then she was able to invite him to read the Book of Mormon with her family. As we were teaching him, he would start asking questions, and he started to open up a lot more. Just it was like a flower. He just like it was really cool to watch. Yeah, we set a baptismal date. In my mission, we were always like, you set a baptismal date in the first lesson if you can, and just if they're skeptical about it, you just say we're just setting it as a goal, because this is what we want. This is what we want for you, rather. Yes, we set that goal and just worked toward it. He was a stalwart. He did all the reading we asked him to. Again, a lot of times at the prodding of his aunt, but I remember we taught a lesson. We retaught the Restoration, the first lesson, and once we come up to Joseph Smith's first prayer, it was just a powerful experience. Just when me and my companion bared our testimonies, it was amazing, and he was just like, okay, let's do this, and we were able to progress with him, and he ended up getting baptized. It was really cool. Sadly, I wasn't with him very long after he was baptized. I got transferred out, but that was one of the cooler experiences while I was out there. So it was actually a family. I was in this little itty bitty city called Vera. It was the Barbosa family. It was a father, his wife. They had a kid who was about 18, and they had just like a bunch of daughters. And they were a member referral. It was actually interesting. They were a member referral from a member who was less active. He said, "Oh, I know this family up the road here is like super into, like, they love talking about God, and maybe you could go teach them." I said, "Okay." So we went up there, and we're able to say, "Yeah, Alejandra, she's a member of the church." "Oh yeah, we know her." So we started off teaching one of the daughters. She was the first one we ran into. Her name was Estefania. She was 24. And she had a little boy whose name was Mariano. He was couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 at the time, I think. So we started off teaching her, and we went to her house. And she's like, I can't right now, but you can come by at a later time. And she's like, okay, yeah, that sounds great. So we went back, and the first lesson actually was kind of a disaster. There were kids running everywhere, tons of people. She was super distracted, wasn't really paying attention to us. There was too much going on for her to focus. So yeah, that first lesson was a total disaster. And me and my companion kind of knew it. I mean, there was nothing there. So we asked if we could come back another time. And I think she was just too polite to say no. So she's like, yeah, you guys can come by. And we set up another time. And we went back, and she actually wasn't there when we went back for the scheduled time, but her little sister was, Sophia. So we just ended up teaching her. And she was more interested in the message. So we kind of shifted our focus to her. And as we went back, kind of just more and more people of the family started joining in. And Estefania finally came back and started listening. It was weird because we kind of taught different members of the family at different stages. I think the most powerful moment was we went back, we taught the message of the restoration again. It was a really good lesson. And at the end, we had one of the littler sisters. Her name was Amelia. We had her say the closing prayer. And the Spirit was so powerful. I mean, the entire family was there. The Spirit was so powerful. We came up, and it was just an amazing feeling. Said amen. And just nobody said a word. And Estefania, the one who had blown us off at first, was just like I feel so happy right now. Not just I'm just happy to be here. I feel actual happiness. Yeah, we went through and ended up baptizing almost the entire family. We were never quite able to get the father while I was there, but we baptized, the mom, all the sisters. In a period of about a month, we were able to baptize his entire family, all because this less active member was just like, I know they like hearing about God. And so it was really, really awesome to watch this family just dive in headfirst into everything that the church had to offer. It was really cool.
So the Argentina Resistencia mission covers 4 provinces: Chaco, Corrientes, Formosa, and Santa Fe. It's a really, really big mission geography-wise. It's also in the northern part of Argentina, so it's the closest to the equator, meaning it's so hot, especially in Formosa. It can get up to 50 degrees Celsius, which is, if I'm remembering, like 120 Fahrenheit. And they give you little, they don't give you, you buy them, little sombreros de paja, little straw hats that you go out. That's kind of the Mormons' distinctive, it's what sets us apart from other religions. They can recognize us by that. In the mission, there are 3 stakes. There are 2 stakes in Resistencia, and there is 1 stake in Formosa. There are also 6 districts. There's the Corrientes district. All the province is 1 district. It's quite large. There are some branches in that district that are basically wards. There is the Rio Paraná district, which includes some of the smaller districts in Corrientes and the branches that there are in Santa Fe. There is the Clorinda district, which is my personal favorite, which is in Formosa. It is right by the border between Argentina and Paraguay. So you have there's actually a temple in Asunción, Paraguay, that is just outside of the mission limits. And then you have the Clorinda district, which is on the Argentina half of the border. We really, really wanted to go to the temple. Most members go to the Asunción, Paraguay temple even after they've dedicated the Córdoba temple. The Asunción is still closer. And the missionaries always wanted to go when there were temple trips, but we couldn't get permission because there were so many missionaries from different countries. There's about 40% North American, 60% Latinos from various countries, and it was impossible to get visas for everybody. So as a policy, none of us could go. We were sad about that, but I tried to make up for it by attending the temple as much as possible after my mission. Almost everybody in Argentina is religious. I think maybe 2% of the people you'll talk to will claim they're atheists. Most will claim they're Catholics. To what degree, that is quite varying. Some are practicante católicos, which is they're very firm in their beliefs. Most of them are Catholics by baptism, meaning they were raised Catholic, but they don't actually do anything with it. Perhaps they have a statue of the Virgin in front of their house. You'll see a lot of that. They have on just street corners and in public, even in schools. They have little statues of the Virgin Mary in glass cases with candles and roses and all these things, and that is something that is completely normal for them. There's also quite a large growing branch of evangelicals, which is really a Protestant church, which is really Protestants with a lot of theatricality. They are as varied as they come. You'll have one pastor that teaches one thing, another pastor that teaches another thing. They are, one of the things that we did when we taught the Restoration is we explained that there is one God. He gives the same instructions to all his children, even if he teaches them in different ways. And that therefore there is one true church. Sometimes it was accepted, sometimes it wasn't. Some crazy ones, like we steal babies and we send them to the United States. And that's totally crazy. We haven't done that in years. That's what we'd always say. Sometimes it got a reaction. I think what happened is sometimes if somebody joined the church and keep going to the church, they keep going, and occasionally they'd serve a mission and they'd leave the country for 2 years. And there were rumors, what happened? Oh, the Mormons kidnapped him. They sent him off to the United States. You have, I think these are pretty typical misconceptions that happen all over the world. Like we worship Joseph Smith, or I didn't get the we have 12 wives just occasionally. Most of us recognized us as good people. Even when they rejected us, they said, yes, you have a church, but I also have a church that's just as good. It wasn't as we're superior to you or anything. It was just, I don't see a need for it. The culture of the mission when I got there was, in order to get baptized, you needed to attend church 3 times, pass a baptismal interview, and that was it. And so the training I got was get people to church. Getting people to church is the hardest commitment that you'll get. You can extend a baptismal invitation in the first lesson, and really they will accept it a shocking amount of the time, even if it's for a specific date a month and a half down the road. Like 70% of the time they'll accept a baptismal date. Now maybe 10% of the people who accept a baptismal date actually go to church, which makes me think sometimes it was because the missionaries were either being pushy or because they had the intention at that moment and it didn't follow up. A lot of the times, in order to help people go to church, in the mornings we'd go and knock on their door. The church is always at 9 a.m. So if you imagine having church at 9 a.m. now, imagine having that for all your mission. And in a country where there's a very laid-back culture on the weekends, people are very used to sleeping in. Sometimes we go and knock on their doors at 8:45 and walk with them to the church. It usually worked. We had a great success in getting investigators to come to church. But the problem was after baptism, we stopped doing that, of course, and not very many people were retained, which is kind of concerning to me. And it was concerning to the mission president as well. So after this time, he said, okay, the most important commitment is not that they go to church. It is that they read the Book of Mormon. If you have an investigator that is reading the Book of Mormon, they will come to church by themselves. You don't need to worry about bringing them to church. I think it's a case of helping them build their testimony up a little at a time. So yeah, I would recommend studying the Book of Mormon and being able to clearly communicate the importance of it in 30 minutes or less, along with the rest of the Restoration. Yeah, that takes practice. You need to know what to focus on and what not to. But keep the Book of Mormon as a key in your teachings. Well, my first mission president was from Arizona. He was President Heyman. He had been there for quite a while, for about, I think, maybe 2 years when I had gotten down there. So he was a really good mission president. He had a genuine interest in all of us, and he knew how to motivate us. When he left, we received Presidente Franco, who was he and his wife had grown up in Buenos Aires. When he was 20, he moved to Utah, to West Jordan, and he lived there for 35 years. He was the CEO of a watch company. And then he came back to Argentina, and he understood the culture. He really focused us on the atonement of Jesus Christ, on being able to give people that hope and that change that they have in their lives. I really like President Franco because he was focused on building great missionaries. Not only building a great mission, but building great missionaries. Individually, he cared about us, and he knew our strengths and weaknesses. He was willing to give us room to try to fly. He was willing to correct us when we made mistakes, of course, but he was willing to let us grow and try to figure out for ourselves what worked and what didn't. So my first area was Fontana. There are two cities called Fontana in the mission. There's one in Chaco, which is right next to Resistencia, and there's one that is clear up in Formosa that is kind of in the middle of nowhere. I served in the one that was by Resistencia. I served there for 3 transfers. Then I was transferred to Malvinas, which is a different ward in the same state. It was actually about 10 minutes away from my old area. I served there for 1 transfer. Then I went to Puerto Tirol, which is a very small, sort of isolated city that is about 40 minutes outside of Resistencia by bus. It's only about 20 in a car. I served there for 2 transfers. That in Puerto Tirol, that's a very small branch where there's about 25 people that go to church there. And it was quite a trying experience because basically we were the church. The branch president actually went inactive 3 weeks after he had gotten there because he was just not that interested in it. So basically we were the church. The stake president and 2 of his high counselors and their wives had to drive up from Resistencia every week in order to deliver the lessons and to lead the meetings. There was quite a lot of responsibility, but I hope I did okay. Then I went to Clorinda, which is probably my favorite area. That's clear up in Formosa, right by the border between Paraguay and Argentina. The people there are so nice. I served there for 3 transfers. I love Clorinda so much. That's probably going to be the first place I go to when I go back. Then after that, I was transferred to Corrientes in a branch that has the best name out of any branch you've ever heard. It's called Maipú. So I got it right home. I've been transferred. I'm serving in Maipú. And that also was a very, very tight branch. It was basically the size of a functioning ward, and everyone was super close to each other. We felt very accepted. I had heard a lot of rumors about Corrientes, about how it's the hardest part of the whole mission, and no one accepts you there. They're not true. I had heard so much negative stuff, and I got there and like, wow, this is great. Even though Clorinda was my favorite area, my transfer in Corrientes was probably my single favorite transfer in the whole mission. Then after that, I was transferred to Formosa Capital in Barrio in the terminal ward. I was there for 1 transfer. Then after I was in the Barrio Italia, the Italy ward, I was there for 1 transfer. And after that, I finished my mission in El Colorado, which is a very, very, very small pueblito, similar to Puerto Tirol. That's about 2.5 hours by bus outside of Resistencia. Whenever we went to zone meetings, there was a zone district in El Colorado. We had to drive 2.5 hours in bus to get to Resistencia, have the meeting 2.5 hours back. It was an all-day affair. That also was quite trying because there both the missionaries, both the elder missionaries were the counselors to the branch president because there wasn't enough leadership. So I learned quite a lot about running a branch and getting to know the members and how the church works organizationally. It was quite crazy, but I hope I was able to handle it. I did the very best that I could, and I think I'm better for it. Corrientes is a much bigger city. It's actually the biggest city in the mission, even bigger than Resistencia. You have Resistencia here in Chaco. You have this river separating them with this great big bridge across, and then you have Corrientes. There you'll have more paved roads, more established cities and more established businesses, but you'll also have a lot of poorer neighborhoods where you have dirt roads. It's just a mix of everything in Corrientes. Corrientes is the most touristic city in the whole mission. You can go and there's so many things, if you have a camera, you can take a picture of. It's maybe not the parts where you're proselyting, but if you take a bus and go do some sightseeing around the capital, there's a lot. There's a whole lot you can get. There's a whole lot of interesting things. There's museums, there's great big malls. The only mall in the mission is in Corrientes, and that has the only McDonald's in the mission. It's super popular among missionaries and has one of only 2 subways in the mission. So whenever people get the chance to, and also in Corrientes, that's where you do your paperwork so that you can be legal in Argentina. Every couple of months, the missionaries will get called down to Corrientes and do trámites, do paperwork. Afterwards, they always want to go to McDonald's. Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. There's a movie theater in Corrientes. Obviously, as a missionary, you're not going to be going there, but it's nice to know that it exists. It's like a breath of fresh air when just walking into that mall. The members in Corrientes, well, particularly the Maipú branch, they were so supportive of the missionaries. They were willing to go with us on divisions. They were willing to help us out in lessons. And Corrientes, it was a little bit difficult to find investigators that would continue receiving us. More difficult than in other parts of the mission. But they had so much better support. Well, they had so much support from the members that they were so well supported by the members. They would help us to come to them to lessons. They would see that they had ways to get to church. They would feel welcome in the ward. They would sit by them in the classes. That I just felt, I felt they were so incredibly solid. And Corrientes was my favorite city to do missionary work in. So Clorinda is right on the other, so you have Asunción, Paraguay, which is the capital of Paraguay, and you have the Argentine border, and right on the other side you have Clorinda. It's a very nice city. It's super hot in the summer, or so they tell me. I served there in the winter, and it was about as hot as it was in summer in any of the other provinces. But the people there are so nice, especially in Formosa. They're so just accepting and receptive of you. You have a really large variety of houses. Sometimes you'll have houses that basically could be on the same standard as the houses here, just slightly smaller. Then you can have houses that range so widely, they're basically constructed of whatever they had on hand, whether it be bricks or boards of plywood or little tin grating, whatever they can build their houses out of. You have the range is so wide, depending on what neighborhood you're in. It's close to Paraguay, so there's a lot of Paraguayos, and they have a very laid-back atmosphere. There's a large Aboriginal colony, which is native Argentines. There's a large Aboriginal colony, which is Native American Argentines. Crime was not a problem in Clorinda. In Resistencia, in Formosa, you had to be careful. In Corrientes, once someone tried to steal our cell phone. But Clorinda, there wasn't a problem. In most of the smaller cities in the mission, it's not a great big problem. P-Day in Argentina is kind of a kicker. A kicker, that's what we'll call it. Because there's a mission rule that you can't play soccer or ping pong or get together and do sports with anybody except your companion. So what most missionaries do on P-Days is they just sleep. It's our day to take a break. I couldn't complain. I was perfectly willing to sleep. There's not a lot of activities we do. There's regulations you can't get together with the members because missionaries in the past made some poor decisions and bad things happen. So now, por culpa de pocos, todos sufren. The people there are awesome. I cannot stress that enough. Talk to as many people as you can in Clorinda and Formosa. They are so accepting. In Clorinda, once on our P-Day, there was a member family that invited us to do something very fun. There's this river that separates Argentina and Paraguay. So they invited us to go up to that. And we went fishing. Now the first thing you do is you get a little teeny twig and a little bit of fishing line. It's not fishing poles like we have. Just stick a little bit of meat at the end and dip it in the river and catch little piranhas that are teeny. They're about this big. You catch them, you pull them out. And then what they do is they get the piranhas that we've caught. We cut them into little pieces, so they're kind of fresh. Sorry, vegetarians. And then we get a aerosol can with lots and lots and lots of line wrapped around it. Then you go out and you get the bits of piranha, stick that on a hook, and you just throw it out as far as you can in the middle of the river, and you can catch big fish that are like this big. It was such a fun activity, and I'm so grateful to the Roa family for letting us do that. So the thing about food in Argentina, they don't have the custom to eat dinner. They just don't do it. Instead, what you're going to do, you're not going to have dinner appointments. You're going to have lunch appointments, where you go to a member's house and they're going to cook this great big lunch, which is about, I don't know, 150% of the size of a dinner you'll eat here. So your stomach's going to expand your first few weeks, but you'll get used to it, don't worry. And you'll eat breakfast, you'll go out in the morning, you'll eat lunch usually with a member family, and you'll get really full off of that. What was most common was, depending on the area, like I said, it's such a big mission that there's such a wide variety of cultures, but what was really common was guiso, which is rice and meat and whatever else they had boiled and served. If you ever get the chance to have an asado, go for it. You're not going to regret it. They don't come every day, but go for it. The barbecue is so much better than the barbecue in the United States. They just get meat, sausage, grilled on a grill. I think that's redundant. You just get grilled meat with so much seasoning. If you ask someone, hey, what's the best way to make an asado, you'll get 12 different answers. But it's just so tasty. It's super good. What's popular, what the mission office likes to buy for multi-zone conferences is get pizza. And the pizza is different than the pizza in the United States. You'll have green olives, you'll have ham, you'll have cheese, you'll have eggs. Sometimes you'll have little chopped up steak on it. You'll have empanadas. Empanadas are huge down there. My favorite is ham and cheese empanadas, but they also have meat. They also have jacare, which is corn and cheese, and it's actually a lot better than it sounds. So be adventurous, try it. They have hamburgers, and the hamburgers are actually pretty similar to the hamburgers here. Almost always with egg, almost always with ham, salt and pepper, all that. Initially, when I left the MTC, I didn't have my visa ready. None of us in our MTC district had it ready, so we served for about 3 months in various other missions in the United States. I served in the Texas Houston South mission, and we all got our visas. We all flew out of our various missions. We met up at the Atlanta airport. We were all super excited to see each other, kind of nervous about what to expect in Argentina. We touched down in Buenos Aires, then we flew up to Resistencia in there's a very small airport there. And we got off, the mission president was there, the assistants were there, we got off the plane, they took us on a bus to the mission office, and we saw, it's so crazy what you see. We saw all these dirt roads, we have all these great big orange blocks that make up the buildings that are basically sand. You've never seen anything like it. Little hand-painted signs selling gas or fruit or whatever. And that was all our first impression. So it's very difficult to describe. You have to see it to believe it. We went to the mission office. They gave us some training. And the next day we were in our areas with our companions. And I had a really great trainer. So all the work that we did in Argentina was done on foot, which was a change because in Texas I was used to biking and using a car everywhere, but we had these great big large areas. My first area was basically an entire city, Fontana, and we walked around. We got to know the members. Contacting there is different. You don't knock doors because people have these gated areas in front of their houses. And it's not polite to go up and just knock on the door. Sometimes they don't even have doors, just a little piece of cloth draped over the opening. So you go up and you clap, and that's how you contact. We didn't spend a lot of time contacting like street by street, house by house. Instead, we went from point A to point B, and if we felt inspired to knock a certain door, we'd go up and we'd knock it. And sometimes we'd go 2 or 3 in a visit. Sometimes we'd just contact at will, basically randomly, wherever we felt like it, wherever the spirit indicated. The first chapel that I had actually wasn't a chapel, it was a branch. It wasn't a great big building that owned and built by the church. It was just on the main street in the city. There was a little shop that used to be a pharmacy. It was closed, and so we put a bunch of chairs in, put a podium in, It had enough rooms for the priesthood and the Relief Society, the primary, that was adequate to their needs, and they just put a little tiny sign in front of it, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it didn't look like a church at all aside from that plaque. So when we invited people to church, they said, hey, have you been on the Calle Alvear? Oh yeah, there's that. So you know there's that one thing that's a pharmacy, it's between this and this. People would say, no, I don't know what that is. In the end, we just got a picture of it and we carried it around with us. And like, you remember this? Oh yeah, that's a church. I didn't even know that. And yeah, that's how we invited people to church. In Argentina, it rains a lot, and most of the streets are made of dirt. If you go to Argentina and you do not have boots, you are going to be very, very, very miserable. Because when it rains, nobody leaves their house, nobody goes shopping, nobody goes to church, nobody does anything. But you, my friend, as a missionary, will be doing all those things. You should have boots and you should have a really good coat and a really good umbrella. I was super awkward before the mission. I haven't changed much, but I've changed a little. I figured out how to get to know people. A lot of missionaries will go and they'll try to snap their finger together like this. Just basically like that. I can't do it. Everyone else did it. Everyone else thought it was amazing. Maybe I just missed it. But that'll be popular. Figuring out how to snap your finger like this. So once, it was my first week in an area, the branch president, so I was the new missionary, and it was pretty customary for the new missionaries to speak in church. The branch president called me and he said, hey, would you be able to give a 10-minute talk about something? So I felt, okay, we should talk about the Sabbath day and how coming to church gives us blessings. And so I went up and I said, el día de reposo debe ser un delito. Todos nosotros debemos deleitarnos en el día de reposo. I was trying to say the Sabbath day is a delight. I give the talk, I go and sit down, my companion, who was Mexican, says, you know what a delito is? It's a crime you commit. I was saying, the Sabbath day should be a crime. We should all think that the Sabbath day is a crime. If you have the atonement, things will work out. The atonement can make up for anything. I studied the gospel of Jesus Christ closer than I had ever studied it before. I gained more insights, and I was able to, and I gained more insights about it, and I was able to really see the change that it can make in people's lives, not just in investigators, but in other missionaries and in my own. Teach and understand the doctrine of the atonement, and everything will work out after that. If you're in Resistencia, Formosa, Corrientes, be smart about what areas you are at night. Don't be stupid. Don't ever carry money with you. If you carry American money with you, you are just asking for it. Don't carry your camera with you unless it's you're really, really sure you can hide it. And don't go in areas where thieves probably are. You can recognize them. If you stick to main roads, well-lit roads, then at night, then you have no problem. So we were walking down the road in a part of our area that we usually hadn't gone, and there was this one kind of larger lady, kind of dressed up. It's typical for evangelicals, women to always wear skirts. And so we were walking down the road, and she saw us, and she's like, hello, my angels, how are you? And she just walked over us and like, how are you doing? It's so great. I'm so happy that you are doing such great work for God. It's you suffer a lot. Sometimes you don't eat, isn't it? Like, is there any, like, and she just talking, like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. Do you want a pamphlet? And she's like, hey, can we have a prayer right here? And she's, okay. And so she grabs our hands, and then she just says, oh, God, please bless these people so that they can go and do everything. We love you, God. We love you, God. And we're like, okay, that was really, really interesting. And then we give her a pamphlet, and she says she lives really, really, really far out in the area. So I said, okay, well, if we're ever in that spot, we'll go and check it out. 2 or 3 days later, we are walking down in the same spot again, and we walk past the little evangelical church, and she's outside it, and she sees us and starts waving at us like, hey, you came. And so we go over and talk to her and says, okay, you came to my church. Not technically, we're standing outside your church. This is, okay, since you came to my church, I'm going to go to your church. Oh, really? Well, okay. Is all right, if you want, wait here at 8:30 Sunday morning and we'll come by and we'll walk with you. So we had a couple other people that we were going down to go talk to, and Sunday morning we go and meet those people. Actually, it's a family. We're all walking down together, and we see her, and she's like, "Whoa, all right, I'm here. I'm ready. I told you I'd be here." And she just talks the whole way down about like, "Wow, look at all the pretty things that God's created." And we're very happy, of course, but we're just so confused why someone with such a totally different background would want to come with us to church. And she goes and she's in sacrament meeting, and about halfway through, they start giving the talks. And whenever the speaker pauses, she just looks up and goes, "Gloria a Dios." Another 30 seconds, "Hallelujah." The 30 seconds, "Gloria a Dios." And she just makes these comments all throughout the second half of sacrament meeting and throughout gospel principles. And I don't know what she did in the early society, but I heard stories. And everyone was just happy she was there, but trying to keep herself from containing herself. We finally go and we finally meet her. And it turns out she's a less active member. She was baptized when she was 9, and she has schizophrenia. So it was super, super interesting to meet her, and it was a great experience. Kind of funny. So we were in Corrientes, which is one of the bigger cities. We are walking down kind of late at night at part of our area, and we're thinking, maybe it's not the best idea to be here, but we have some contacts, and we go and we talk to them. And I think I made a joke. We're totally going to get robbed. And 15 minutes later, guess what happens? Some little 13-year-old kid with a knife that's really totally drugged up. He goes up and says, "Say your life, say your life." And he says he wants our valuables. So my companion, he is at the end of his mission. All he is carrying around is this really, really, really old beat-up scripture case containing a couple pamphlets. He didn't even have a Book of Mormon in it. We had given it out that day. I, on the other hand, had this great big backpack with my full mission scriptures, with stuff that necessarily wasn't valuable, but was valuable to me. So all I do is I just take the phone out of my pocket, I click the screen once we sees the light, it's like, yeah, you want it? Okay, and then I go and I chuck it about, 15 yards behind him. He goes scrambling around to get it. We both take off running. So all I got was this really old Nokia cellular and this really old scripture case that my companion was going to throw away with a couple pamphlets in it, not even a Book of Mormon he got. Sometimes you'd just pray about something and you'd feel really good about it. Sometimes your companion would think that makes no sense, but you're like, you know what, we're going to do it anyway. And it always worked out for the best. Even if I didn't know why at the time. Looking back, there's none of them that I was ever sorry I acted upon. There was one time where we went to church. It was raining super, super hard Sunday morning, meaning that there was about 15 people in church. And we were all pretty disappointed. They canceled the last block of meetings because there wasn't enough people to do it. So we were kind of bummed out. The branch president had gone home, and there was one member from the other ward that met there. They said, "Hey, is the branch president here?" "No, he left." "Who are the missionaries that are in charge of this neighborhood?" And he said, "That's us." And he pulled us into a room and he started talking to us, and he said, "Okay, there's this one family that is really passing by a hard time. They're less active. Only the mom is a member. The kids have been estranged from the church for quite a long time. I need you to go and check up on them, let them know how they're doing, and just tell them you love them. Like, just show you love them and say, hey, we're here for you." And so we did that. It was raining super hard. It was in the farthest part of our area. There was quite a lot of mud we had to walk through, but we did it. We just considered it, hey, we made a promise we'd do it. So we went and did it that same day. And their dad was actually in prison on, what they said, false charges of drug possession. We went and said, hey, comfort those that stand in need of comfort, mourn with those that mourn. We said, hey, we'll do that. Like, we're here to do that with you. We just want to help you out. And what we didn't know at the time was that missionaries had constantly been passing by this family in the past, like every 3 or 4 months, trying to get the kids to be baptized. but they were kind of treating them as baptisms, not as converts. And we ended up building a trusting relationship with that family. They ended up coming back to church and being reactivated. All the kids were baptized. The mom and the dad were reactivated, and they performed baptisms for the dead in the temple. And we were just super, super happy about that, because we listened, we tried our best, and above all, we just tried to love the people and have them accept God's will for their lives, even if God's will wasn't necessarily what our will was for them. It was lesson in humility and charity, but I'm really glad that it happened. You definitely need really, really good boots. You definitely need a really good coat. You definitely need a really good umbrella. You will be very miserable if you go to Argentina without those things. They recommend in your packet that you bring cold weather clothing. Maybe some missionaries will need it. I didn't. If you go to Santa Fe in the southernmost part, I've heard reports from other missionaries that it would come in handy, but that's not a very big portion of the mission. That's just from my experience. I think I traveled a lot lighter than most other missionaries. I didn't bring a whole lot of souvenirs or things from home or like a photo album or anything. You can if you want. There's nothing wrong with it. I didn't bring them, and I think I got by fine. So it's your decision. This is a really great opportunity. There's going to be a lot of good times ahead. There's going to be some times where you're tried, but there's going to be more joy than you can find if you're looking for it. What you should do: follow your mission president's advice, even if you don't understand it. Try to do the very best you can to do what you know God wants you to do. Study the scriptures, and really study them. Really try to get what God is trying to teach you. Don't just do it for the sake of spending an hour. God has a message for you. He's in charge, and He wants to communicate directly with you. And He will. If we don't get in the way, there's nothing that can stop Him. Be humble, be happy, do the very best that you can in the circumstances that you can, and things will all work out. If you have done the very best that you can in your circumstances, you have served a successful mission, no matter what happens. The atonement of Jesus Christ works. It's real. You can use it. It's real. Exercising faith works. Repentance works. The church has the priesthood. The sacrament will help you every single week. Joseph Smith was a prophet. The Book of Mormon is the easiest and clearest proof if you have of that. You need to know this for certain, but you can. I know it. I've asked him really sincerely. I've asked him pleading to know, and I know it. Be obedient to what the mission president asks, even if it doesn't look like anyone else is doing it. You will be blessed for it, even if they look at you as being extreme or not understanding or not knowing how to apply it. You'll be blessed for your obedience. There's a reason why He's giving you that counsel. If you're following it, even if no one else is, even if others criticize you for it, do it anyways. You are to try to follow God as closely as you can.
I remember we landed in Buenos Aires, and then we flew up to Resistencia. And I just remember getting to the country, and it felt different, and I was expecting, it was kind of interesting really, I was expecting the culture change, I was expecting the people to be different, I was expecting the language to be different, but there was still something that was kind of weird, and I remember noticing that it was the plants, like they have different trees, and I was like, oh, that's what feels weird, because I was expecting everything else to be different, but I didn't know, that's just the one thing I remember most of that. They had different plants. Kind of an interesting thing. Interesting first impression, but that's what it was for me. I know they still think the Falkland Islands are theirs. I think England took it from 20 or 30 years ago, but they're still convinced and they still have it on all their maps. And I think early on, their George Washington figure is San Martin. So General San Martin is the guy who worked in the revolution, and I'm not sure if he was their first president, but he's got a street named after him in every city. Culture-wise, it seems like people are outside more. Maybe that's just because I was outside more. But there are a lot of people outside. People weren't afraid to stop and talk to you. Didn't seem like they had strict schedules that they had to keep. It's a lot more laid back. Everyone loves their family and all the families live close together, and they just have a really big emphasis on family, which is something you don't see as much in the United States. It's just a different atmosphere, but it's still, for me, at the end it felt like home. There are a lot of dogs in the street. I didn't really have the problem with dogs, never got bit, never had to kick one. They stayed out of my way. They had some interesting animals. There's an animal, I don't know what it is in English, but it's a coati. And saw a few coati. One time we walked down the street and there was a pet monkey. There was just a monkey tied to the tree and hopping around. That was kind of interesting, but I didn't really have any big animal experiences, I guess. I don't know much about the government. I know they have a president. I don't know what she does, because she's the president. I'm not sure what type of legislation they have in the government level. For school, I talked to a lot of school-aged kids, and I don't remember exactly how it is. I think it's a 7 or 8 year elementary school, and then a 5 or 6 year high school. So they don't have elementary, middle, high school. They just have la primaria and la secundaria. So they just first school and second school. And they're a little bit longer each. It seemed like they had a lot of days off from school. So I don't know why that was. But yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly how education and government work. I was told once that if the Garden of Eden were in Argentina, that there would be no fall of Adam because they don't eat fruits. So he would never have eaten the fruit because they don't have fruit in Argentina. They just have meat. But no, I didn't see any interesting fruits. I mean, they had apples, grapes, strawberries, watermelon, pineapple. They had a few vegetables that I was unfamiliar with. One was a mandioc root that I mentioned before, kind of like a potato. There's another thing called, I don't even remember what it was called. It was kind of like a zucchini, but a ball, a little zucchini ball. So some type of squash. That was pretty good. They would cut that up and put it in their guiso. But I really didn't have any exotic fruits or vegetables. Hola hermano, somos misioneros de la Iglesia de Jesucristo de los Santos de los Últimos Días y tenemos un mensaje de Jesucristo que ayuda a las familias. Y yo sé que al escuchar a este mensaje usted puede conocer más de Cristo, usted puede llegar a amar más a su familia y ser bendecido en su vida. I mean, I hadn't heard miss about Argentina in specific. I just considered it a part of South America. And when I got there, I realized that South America is very diverse. So I was thinking spicy food. I didn't have a single spicy food on my mission. So no spicy food. I was kind of expecting to see a lot of Hispanics, but there were actually a lot of Europeans, people of European descent in Argentina. So I didn't get I was expecting everyone to look like a Mexican, but they all looked like Germans. So that was, not all of them, there was a mix of, it was just very mixed. So I guess I was expecting it to fit the Mexican mold that I learned about in my Spanish classes, but it's a very different country. There were a lot of storms, and the thing is they didn't have, in some of the cities they didn't have a good drainage system. So when it rained hard, it flooded. And so in a couple areas there were a lot of hills and you didn't really notice, except the streets got really muddy and it was hard to walk up the hills. But one of my areas, completely flat city, and it rained and every street in the whole city was under 6 inches of water. And it happened two or three times in the 4 months that I was there. So pretty exciting, trudging along in the river water that's in the streets. The climate, it's subtropical, so it was hot, humid, rained quite a bit. Where I was in North Argentina. South Argentina is a little bit different. It's really cold there, I guess. So climate, I don't know if the climate's any different at all there. It was just always hot where I was. But I'm from Florida, so it was about the same as Florida. Everyone plays soccer. You just see lots of kids on the street. There are a lot of sort of, I guess, blocks that don't have any houses on them. You see kids running around barefoot, kicking the soccer ball. In all of the church houses, they have an outdoor, concrete basketball court, but the basketball hoops are on top of soccer goals, and no one ever uses the basketball hoops. They just use the soccer goals. So soccer is a really big thing. Everyone has two favorite teams. First favorite team is the Argentina national team, and the second favorite team is whatever team they root for. So they have a lot of just professional soccer teams that play, and the two biggest ones are Boca and River. And so a lot of people would just say, do you like Boca or do you like River? And there are a few other teams too, but those are the biggest ones. But everyone has their professional soccer team, everyone has the Argentina soccer team, and soccer's just everywhere. Stores are very specific. So there's the meat store and there's the bread store. They have grocery stores that have sort of, just the basic groceries you need, the flour and the milk and pasta, and they have a little meat corner and a little bread corner. But they aren't huge stores. It's not like walking to Walmart. It's like walking in, I can't even think of an example, just no bigger than an average home in the United States, I would assume. So they're just kind of little. And then every block has what's called a kiosco. So just a little store in a garage, basically, where they have a little cooler with different drinks and ice cream and popsicles and things like that, and then they have shelves with a couple boxes of pasta and a couple things of flour, and they just sort of like everything the grocery store has, but tiny inventory, and they just sell it out of their garage. So you can almost find one on any block in the cities that you're in. I was in a lot of small towns, so I'm pretty sure the big cities aren't quite like that, but all the small towns have kioscos everywhere. Food, I really like Argentine food. One of my favorites is the empanada, and it varies by region, but it's the same basic thing. So they take a little pastry, it's about this big, they roll it flat, you fill it with stuff, you fold it up and fry it. Sometimes people bake it, but it's a lot better when it's fried. And they put different things in it. You can have ham and cheese empanadas, you can have chicken, like diced chicken with different herbs and spices. The most common one's beef, so just ground beef. They put, corn, peppers, hard-boiled eggs, different seasoning, cheese, and just wrap it up, fry it. That's really good. Another thing, everyone just had guiso. They called it guiso. I think translates to stew, if I looked it up in the dictionary. But it's just a plate of pasta or rice, and then they mix a sauce. And it generally has meat in it, either chicken or beef. I didn't get much meat that wasn't chicken or beef. But they mix up some sauce. It could be a tomato base, it could be a cream base, it could be anything else. And then they pour it over the pasta or the rice, and call it guiso. So guiso is really good. They have a lot of different other things. They have asado, which is their barbecue. So they just have a grill on top of charcoal in the open, so it's not closed like an American barbecue, but they just cook their meat on it for a really long time. And they like to do ribs, but not like the ribs we have. They cut it the other way, so the bones are circles, little discs, and then the meat's around it. And then they barbecue their sausage along with that, and everyone has their special sauce and cook it to perfection. Some people say it's offensive if you add salt because everyone cooks it to their perfection. So if you add salt, you're saying that it's not good enough. I don't think I ever had that problem, but so they have a lot of good food, a lot of different things. They had mandioca root, I think. It's like a potato, but a little bit more stringy, and they would fry it. The giso is very common. So they're just a meat sauce with pasta. I had almost every day. They have empanadas are pretty common. They had milanesa, which is thin cut of beef or chicken, and then they bread it and fry it. That was pretty common. And they always had little rolls, like their little loaves, little French bread loaf type things. They just always had a basket on the table, so they always had that. And one other thing is they rarely have water. I had a companion from Argentina who was looking at the Word of Wisdom pamphlet, and there's a picture of a family eating dinner. And he's like, that's such a fake picture. No one has water for dinner. So in Argentina they always have Kool-Aid type mixes or soda, but never have water. I did have one exotic meat was carpincho. And if you've ever seen The Princess Bride, they have the rodents of unusual size. That's what a carpincho looks like. And they would go carpincho hunting, and they would kill it and slice it up and have carpincho sticks. So I did have carpincho, really big rat. And that was pretty good. Well, I know during World War II, a lot of Nazis, or a lot of Germans fled Germany and made their way to Argentina. So there are quite a few Germans there. Something happened during the slave trade era, and there aren't very many black people. So I'm not sure exactly what happened. I think they may have kicked them all out of the country, or they maybe didn't allow slavery, and so black people never got sent to Argentina. But there are very few blacks there. Another thing with the food is that they liked to fry things. One time I had a dinner at a member's house, and he just always had a pan with an inch of oil, and he'd cook everything. He'd cook steak, he'd just deep fry his steak, he would deep fry his sausage. One time he cracked an egg and just dropped it into the oil, and it was cooked in like 3 seconds. He just dropped a whole egg in the oil and pulled it out, and it was just dripping and gross. But so deep fried eggs I wouldn't recommend, but all the other food's great. Okay, so mate is a very big cultural thing in Argentina, and everyone just sits around and drinks mate. And so what it is an herb that they crush up. They dry the leaves, they crush it up, they add different flavorings to it. I never tried it, but people say it tastes like grass. But they put the dry herbs in it in a little cup. Then they have a filtered spoon. So it looks like a spoon with a lid on it with a bunch of holes poked in it. And they pour hot water into the cup where the herbs are, and the spoon's in there, and then you just sort of drink the filter and water through it. And so one person will pour the water, take a drink. He'll pour more water, hand it to the next person. That person will take a drink, and then just so one person holds the water, keeps pouring it and passing it to everyone around. Missionaries weren't allowed to do that. You don't want to share the same straw as a lot of people in Argentina. Very highly concentrated caffeine, very addictive. And another thing, I think it wastes a lot of time, in my experience. People just sit on their front porch, taking 2 hours to drink mate before they get down to business, I guess. So, I mean, those are my reasons why missionaries shouldn't drink mate. But members do, and sometimes that's the ward activity is everyone goes to the church and drinks mate. But it is a very big cultural thing. I never tried it, but I have several Monte cups that I brought home with from all of my different areas. So it was interesting. I took Spanish in high school, so I was in the intermediate group in the MTC. By the time I got to Argentina, I could pretty much say whatever I wanted to. It was really slow, but I could say it. Understanding was a little bit harder, but after, again, maybe 3 or 4 months, I was understanding just about everything.
That's cool.
So it helped having 5 years of high school Spanish. So I would definitely recommend learning a language in high school. You never know what mission you're going to go to, but for me it helped out a lot. What I did was, I had a little bit of Spanish before mission, but I read the entire Book of Mormon out loud before I entered the MTC. And I think that was the biggest help for my pronunciation. A lot of the thing is, or another thing, one benefit, I guess, of what I'm trying to say about reading the Book of Mormon out loud, is it gets your mouth used to not only saying the words, but using correct grammar, and just the flow. Then again, I didn't really have any super dangerous experiences. One time we were on a bus and we got off the bus and some guy came off after us and followed us for a little bit, but we just walked quickly and he shouted after us and we just kept walking. But that's the most dangerous thing that ever happened to me. Each mission has rules, and I think if you obey the rules, you'll be safe. Staying with your companion is probably one of the safest things. No one wants to pick a fight with 2 people. Where I was, again, it wasn't as dangerous. Missionaries in the mission did get robbed every once in a while, but it wasn't a common thing. I never had any problems with anyone trying to rob me, but I think staying with your companion is the safest thing to do. Stay out of the shady alleys at night. Just common sense things like that, I guess. I didn't get parasites. The water in my mission was pretty clean. I only got sick twice on my mission, and there were 2 weekends in a row. I don't know what happened those 2 weekends, but one weekend I had the flu and the other weekend I had the fever. But those were the only 2 times I got sick. Staying healthy, just drink lots of water and get enough sleep. You get enough exercise as it is, so you don't have to worry about that. They do tell you to boil the water, and they sell filtered water, so you can just, when I had water in my apartment, it was the filtered water. When members give you things to drink, when they make their little juice mixes, I'd still drink them, and I didn't have too much problem, but some people do, especially at the very beginning of the mission, so you're not used to it, so definitely be careful the first little bit. But yeah, you get enough exercise as it is, so just make sure you get enough sleep and keep hydrated, because you do a lot of walking in the hot sun. The members will tell you that the sun makes you sick and the wind makes you sick, and I guess there's some truth to that, but bacteria makes you sick. Just one tip, work with the members. The members always had the best investigators. A lot of times it's hard to get references from the members. You have to build up trust. They have to talk to their friends. It's a lot harder to work with the members, but it's a lot more effective, I think, in not finding investigators, but finding good investigators. I could go knock on doors and find lots of investigators. But the good investigators, the ones who are going to make an impact in the church, the ones who are going to stay active, are people who already have friends as members. So I think that's probably the most effective way to find, in my opinion. I don't know. There are a lot of funny, sometimes drunk people come and talk to you. And there was an experience I had where we were walking down the street and a drunk person came up and said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Elder." And he looked at my companion and said, "What's your name?" He said, "Elder." And the guy's like, "You're Elder?" You're elder, I'm elder, we're all elder. So it's just a funny little experience, and we gave him a little pass along card, and he walked away. So that was kind of funny. I was tracking one day with the mission president. He decided to go on exchanges with me and my companion. We were walking down the street, and there was a guy standing in a cart that was pulled by a horse. So he's just sitting on the road, and we stopped and talked to him, and the horse bit my mission president. It's really funny, just like, we're just all standing there talking to the guy in the cart, and the horse just reached over and just bit him on the shoulder. So it was kind of that's the most dangerous animal I saw, was the horse that bit my mission president. I can't think of any particular time. Missionary work is hard. I can't think of a particular time where I had to struggle more than usual. One experience that comes to mind is I had a companion who was, he was pretty young on the mission, just a few months out, and he was sort of struggling with the language, and one day it kind of seemed like he gave up, and his explanation was, I need to learn the doctrine and then I'll learn the language. And so I was kind of struggling with how I could help him speak the language. He just wanted to speak English with me, and so I was wondering what I could do to help, and my first instinct was just to speak Spanish only. And so I spoke Spanish to him. He would reply in English, and I would reply in Spanish, and he could understand quite a bit of what I said. But it was sort of causing a little bit of tension. And so I was being stubborn about it. Probably for 3 or 4 hours, I just spoke at him in Spanish, trying to get him to understand that Spanish was really important. And then I realized that wasn't working at all. And so when we were leaving our apartment for the afternoon, we always prayed when we leave the apartment. And so I offered a companion prayer in English. And I asked him for forgiveness in my prayer, for my stubbornness, for my unwillingness to help him with his problems. And I think that, the tension disappeared. We were a lot closer after that experience. We spoke English, but I grew. I know I grew. And I think he grew as well. Just to know that there was someone else that cared about him. There was someone else that wanted to help him. And again, someone I know says, a lot of times people say, show love. I don't like that phrase. You shouldn't show love. You should actually love the person. And when you actually love them, then they know. And things work out.